Welcome back, fight fans. Welcome back. Let's just dig right into it. This is the IBFP's list of the three most hyped boxers today. On our list, starting at number 3, is Jermall Charlo. Now, the reason why Jermall Charlo is one of the most hyped fighters today is that people are putting Jermall Charlo up in the upper echelons of fighters, such as the Canelo Alvarez, such as the Triple G's and the Danny Jacobs, all world champions or guys who've held world championships at 160 pounds. Jermall Charlo has not beaten a significant name at 160 pounds. He's not a world champion at 160 pounds. He's nothing more than a contender at 160 pounds. Although Jermall Charlo does have all the potential in the world, and he could be potentially a very good fighter, we don't know that yet because he has not yet proven that at 160 pounds by fighting the best fighters there is. Now, the reason why we put him on the hype list is because we believe that Jermall Charlo is being put up there as he's already an established fighter, in which he is not. He is not an established elite level fighter. You have a lot of pundits and commentaries coming at it, and some people are going as far as putting him on a pound for pound list. Other guys rating his victories as higher than what they should be. And so let's just not get carried away. And a lot of this bias, fake new media are fanboying for Jermall Charlo, putting him up there, stating that, if Golovkin, Canelo, or Jacobs don't fight him, they're ducking. And that's absolutely absurd. Jermall Charlo is not proven. He's overly hyped. And being an overly hyped fighter doesn't mean you're not a good fighter or even a potentially great one. We don't know, because your hype is exceeding the reality of where you are right now. So that doesn't mean Jermall Charlo can't hit these heights. It just means as of right now, the reality of the situation is he's not an elite fighter and he's not proven at 160. Number 2 on our list as far as the most hype fighters out there today, and I have to do it, but it has to be Vasyl Lomachenko. And the reason why it has to be Vasyl Lomachenko is because I believe Vasyl Lomachenko is an elite fighter. I believe he's a top pound for pound fighter, but I believe he's a top 10 pound for pound fighter. I don't believe he's a top 5 pound for pound fighter. And the reason why I don't say top 5 pound for pound is because I look at guys like Mikey Garcia, Saul Canelo Alvarez. I look at Anthony Joshua and Alexander Usyk. You look at those type of guys and you let those guys round out the top 5. You have to be honest and unbiased when you're assessing a fighter, their resume, and what they've accomplished and what they've done. Some people will even put Triple G in the top 5. So we have to be honest about how good these guys are, how much they've proved and accomplished. And I understand that Vasyl Lomachenko didn't look great in this last outing against Jose Pedraza, but at the same time, he doesn't have 20 fights. He's already been defeated by an Orlando Salido. So there's a lot of things that Vasyl Lomachenko has to do to prove that he's one of the top 3 fighters, and he's being overly hyped by people saying that he's the number 1 pound for pound. I've never had Vasyl Lomachenko on my number 1 pound for pound list. I've never had him in my top 3 pound for pound list. At best, he could be in the bottom 5. But in my opinion, I think he's towards the bottom 10. And that's not because he doesn't have the skills, the talent, or he's not elite. He is elite. He has skills and he has talents. But I think that he's missing a signature win that will put him over the top, that will rank him in the top 10. Now, some people will ask, why does Vasyl Lomachenko need a huge signature win right now to be listed in the top 3, pound for pound list? And the reason why I say he needs a signature win is because he's had less than 20 fights and he's already taken a defeat. And so because of those 2 things alone, and his biggest fight was against a Guillermo Rigo who moved up 2 weight divisions to compete with him. You have to understand that he's not going to get maximum credit for that. I was one of the guys saying that him fighting a small Guillermo Rigo is not going to be something that you can get maximum credit for. And then on the reverse end, when you look at it, he comes out and says, I don't want to fight Manny Pacquiao, basically, because I wouldn't get credit for it because he's older. Well, if you feel that way, then why did you fight Rigo? And clearly Manny Pacquiao still has a lot left in the tank. By his last fight, stopping a Lucas Matisse. It shows that he still has some juice, and that's a fight that many people would love to see. I think it'll be a good measuring stick for Vasyl Lomachenko. Now, just because Vasyl Lomachenko is being overly hyped by putting at number one on a pound-for-pound list, I understand it's subjective, but for our sake, for the IBFP's pound-for-pound list, I don't believe he scratches the top three, and that's honestly because I just feel like people are pushing him too high up to the top. Now, that doesn't mean he's not elite, because he is a very elite fighter. He's very talented, and he has a great skill set, and he can be a top three pound-for-pound fighter. He just needs a signature win. The number one fighter on our list as far as the most hyped fighter has to be an Errol Spence Jr. And the reason why Errol Spence Jr. is probably the most hyped fighter on our list and number one as far as being hyped is because people believe that Errol Spence Jr. has an amazing boxing pedigree. Now, that doesn't mean that Errol Spence Jr. doesn't have an elite punching power or have basic fundamentals. Errol Spence Jr. does have good boxing fundamentals, but he doesn't have good head movement defensively. Defensively, he leaves himself open, and also as far as his fundamentals, they're good, but they're basic. He's not an elite fundamental or an elite boxer. He doesn't shoot with a lot of different angles and switch styles. Errol Spence Jr. is one of the most highly predictable fighters there is. And his resume does not support people saying that he's a top 5 pound-for-pound fighter. I'm sorry, it just does not. Carlos Ocampo and Kell Brook coming off a knockout loss. Now, if we're honest and unbiased, we'll admit that the Kell Brook fight was his biggest win of his career. It's what secured him the IBF world title. And basically, it's what elevated him to the stature of he is now. But a lot of people are overhyping Errol Spence as if he can't be defeated, as if he has no flaws. He is a very flawed fighter defensively, and offensively he's a power puncher and who does not appear to have one punch knockout power. And so let's not overrate who Errol Spence Jr. is. He's been hit square on the chin by lesser competition such as Lamont Peterson. I mean, even if you look at Carlos Ocampo, he was stopped in the first round, landed a great combination on him before he was stopped. Carlos Ocampo is not an elite fighter. He's a Mexican domestic level fighter, so you can't expect anything from him. He was a mandatory for Errol Spence. Errol Spence, by his own admission, claims that Chris Algieri was his best opponent. A Chris Algieri who was knocked down multiple times by Manny Pacquiao. A Chris Algieri who's never done anything to prove that he's an elite or A-level fighter. So by Errol Spence Jr.'s own admission that he won't even rank Kell Brook as the best fighter on his resume for the simple fact that Kell Brook was coming off a knockout loss, an injury, and had to drain himself back down 147 pounds. Because of those three factors, we can't say that Errol Spence Jr. is a top pound-for-pound fighter. As far as the top 3 or top 5, I think he rounds out the top 10, and that's being generous at best. Similar to Vasyl Lomachenko, I feel if Errol Spence Jr. beats Mikey Garcia, then I'll give him credit for that. And some people say, well, he's moving up 2 weight classes. Well, you also have to look at it. Mikey Garcia has already won a world title at 140 pounds. So that means he's technically, in some people's eyes, he's only moving up 1 weight class to compete within Errol Spence Jr. So since he's moving up, and some people can say 1 weight class, then you have to look at it like this. Errol Spence Jr. should get credit for defeating a 4-division world champion in Mikey Garcia. I will give him that credit because Mikey Garcia is going to be the best opponent on his resume and his toughest test to date, and a pound-for-pound fighter. So all of these accolades I'm going to give to Errol Spence Jr. should he defeat a Mikey Garcia. Yes, he's going to have an enormous size advantage, but I believe skill can beat size, because you have a lot of people that continues to reiterate that same saying, and that is, a good big man beats a small, good small man. And if you look at it like this, it's not that. It's that Errol Spence Jr. is not an elite overall fighter. So there's multiple categories in boxing. There's boxing ability. There's, and I'll rate him at average, and in the good average skill set as far as boxing ability. Mikey Garcia is elite. You average him at head movement, and that's poor. Mikey Garcia can be elite at that. Although Mikey Garcia tends to walk his opponents down because he's big in the other weight classes, I believe Mikey Garcia has the immense boxing ability and skill set to prove that he can move laterally, move his head, and protect himself against a bigger fighter such as an Errol Spence Jr. Once again, it's the IBFP, unbiased as always. Please share, like, and you must absolutely subscribe.